In today's video, we are going to tell you about all of the top running back sleepers that you need to know for your 2021 fantasy football drafts. Let's go. All right, Kev, it is August. That means it's draft season. That means we are prepping. Football is finally here. And that also means doing your homework, knowing your sleepers. So we got some sleepers that you guys need to keep your eyes on at the running back position. So let's just dive right into the goodness, shall we? Kev, I'm going to give you the floor first. Who is the first running back sleeper that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I don't know if he's so much as a sleeper as much as he was, even just 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's starting to rise up the old ADP board. But my first guy is Damien Harris. He's going around 605, RB30 right now, FFC ADP. So if you look at him like last year, he played in 10 games. He played 47% of the opportunities, 13.7 touches per game. He had 137 carries, 21 red zone touches, 691 rushing yards, but he only had 7 targets for 52 receiving yards. So was not utilized at all in the passing game, which is a little bit different because he was decent at Alabama. I think he had 52 career receptions or something like that at Alabama, but he's not a prolific pass catcher or anything like that. But I would call him more of a functional pass catcher. But 7 targets is not something you want to see. But 9.1 fantasy points per game, which is 38th. But he was ultra efficient. 4.8 true yards per carry, which is 6th among all running backs, 8th in juke rate, 242 yards created, which was 22nd, but 1.70 yards created per touch, 9th among all running backs last year. And he also faced a stacked front on 42% of his touches, but he still averaged 4.8 yards per carry, which was 2nd among all running backs last year. He plays on a team that runs the ball a ton. Patriots ran the ball on 51% of their plays last year, which was 2nd only to the Ravens. Of the 10 games he appeared in, Harris posted 5 top 24 performances and averaged 12.0 points per game in those 5 games that he managed to rush for 100 yards in 3 of those games and tied for the 6th most 100-yard games of any running back in 2020. Some other good news, Rex Burkhead is gone. He averaged about 6 carries per game. And he's been balling in camp, and they've actually been utilizing him as a pass catcher as well. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they use him a little bit more this year. Sony Michel is still there, so that is something to note. And then you also have James White, they brought him back as well. So obviously he's still going to be the pass catching back here. But this offense is going to be much more of that. They're going to be running the ball. They're not going to be out here airing it out like they used to with Tom Brady. And so, I know there's going to be some knock against them because of Cam Newton there, and what he can take away from him on the goal line. But I don't expect Cam Newton. Cam Newton is not going to start this entire year unless Cam Newton rips it, just tears it up and returns to 2016 Cam Newton, which I don't see happening. And so I think Mac Jones starts sooner rather than later. And once that happens, it really could be wheels up for Damien Harris. And the thing I love about him the most is ADP. He's still not going really high. RB3 right now. And so I like the value you're able to get on him. Yes, he doesn't catch passes, which is something I look for. But if you're getting him as probably like your RB4, RB3, RB4, I don't mind that at all because I think there's going to be some opportunities there. He is going to get some goal line work, and just how efficient he was. The hard part, though, I will say this, is I am certainly not someone who usually invests in Patriot running backs because Bill Belichick is the death to fantasy gamers. When we think we know what's going to happen, he flips the switch on you. If Sony Michel is gone too, it is absolutely wheels up for Damien Harris because there's nobody else there outside of Ramondre Stevenson that they drafted there that could really take away any touches from him. So I like him quite a bit. I think he takes another step forward in usage, and so I like that as kind of that middle round guy.
Yeah, it almost feels like as if we are being baited into a trap with Damien Harris, but I do agree with everything you said. I do like him as well. It's odd that especially for both of us to kind of be on board and he's getting talked up that Bill's talking about him taking the next step forward and everything If this ends poorly, I won't be surprised. But as of right now, I am on the Damien Harris train as well. The first guy that I'm going to bring to the table, not necessarily a sleeper in the original sense. He's a name that we know, but he's being drafted as if he's not going to have any role. You're getting this guy as an RB4, and I think he should be going higher than that, quite frankly. And I'm talking about none other than Latavius Murray for the New Orleans Saints. Over on Fantasy Football Calculator, he is going in the 10th round as RB47. So damn near RB5. And we saw the blurbs coming out earlier in the offseason before the Michael Thomas stuff hit. And they were talking about wanting to get the running backs more involved early on. We still don't know exactly what's going to go on in terms of the quarterback situation. So it makes sense to lean on the running backs earlier on in the season. And we know that the Saints and Sean Payton do not want to ride Alvin Kamara. He has never had more than 200 carries in the season. His highest was in 2018 with 194. I'm not using that to knock him at all, because obviously for fantasy purposes, he's had triple-digit targets, I think, every year, or maybe every year except one. So it's not a knock on him fantasy-wise, but we do know that Latavius Murray is going to filter in this offense, and if they're gonna be talking about utilizing the running backs more, that's also going to be more volume and more touches for Latavius as well. So he's somebody who you can get, you were talking about RB3, RB4 for Damien Harris. This guy you can get as your RB5, RB6. If you want to pound running backs early and then leave those middle rounds completely open and completely free from running backs, and then get Latavius. He's someone who's going to have some standalone value. It isn't great whenever he and Alvin Kamara are both healthy. He's only averaged 8.8 and 8.3 fantasy points per game with Kamara healthy. So obviously those, under double-digit fantasy points per game isn't something that, we want to go out and fall over trying to draft and reach out for that guy. But again, RB47, 10th round. And the thing here to note is and it's a small sample size, I get it, but in the 2 games that Kamara missed last year when Latavius Murray was able to get the full workload, his per game averages over those 2 games, he bumps all the way up to 24 rushing attempts, 110 rushing yards per game in those 2 games. He also saw 9 targets, 7 receptions, and he is averaging almost 31 half PPR points per game. Again, 2 games, small sample size. But what this tells me is that whenever Kamara goes out, Latavius Murray is the guy. There's not necessarily somebody that they are, rotating in with him if Kamara were to miss any time. So someone who, could have some, especially if you're in a 2 flex league, someone you can plug in that second flex spot, feel good about. But like I said, with the added volume that Latavius should see, especially early on in the season, combined with this draft price, I really like him. And it's in terms of a sleeper, quote unquote, but more like a guy who's undervalued currently in drafts.
Yeah, I think he's always a strong handcuff guy, a handcuff option, or not handcuff, because I don't believe in handcuffing your running backs, but a guy that you should be looking to pick up in the later rounds that has immense value, much like an AJ Dillon, Tony Pollard. I think they're all in that same kind of role. If something happens to Alvin Kamara, it's going to be wheels up for Latavius Murray. And it wasn't just last year he did it the year before too. Every time he's been given opportunity, he has made the most of it. So, and I do think that he is somebody that on certain weeks that you could possibly plug in as a flex option or something like that if you absolutely needed somebody. I think he's not a bad option either. But yeah, so I agree on that. And I've always liked Latavius Murray. If you can get him in the later rounds, stash him. If something happens, or if you're in a pinch, you could use him. I definitely think those are all in the range of possibilities for him. So yeah, I like Latavius Murray. I'm going to go on to my next one. This is a tough one for me because I have always been a Chase Edmonds absolute stan, and I love Chase Edmonds. But it's so hard to invest in this year when he's going at 512. People are hyping him up, calling him Austin Eckler light or Alvin Kamara light, and I'm like, I love Chase Edmonds. I do. I love the player. He was great last year. I was targeting him everywhere, but he was also going significantly later. And so you could get him much more easier. And yes, he finishes a top 15 running back last year in PPR formats, but here's the problem. Like James Conner, they bring in James Conner, and I do think that he at least takes on some semblance of the Kenyon Drake role. So if you look at James Conner last year, he wasn't terrible. He's currently going at RB35 and underdog and 8.03 in FFC. He averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game. He had 169 carries, 35 receptions on 43 targets, 935 total yards, 6 touchdowns. He was 20th in yards created, 24th in yards created per touch. He had 52 evaded tackles, which is pretty impressive considering he only played in 13 games. He was 19th in breakaway run rate. So he wasn't as bad as people would make him out to be. But obviously in the second half, the Steelers offense absolutely caved in and collapsed on itself. And so, James Conner didn't really pay off the draft capital that he had last year. But if you look at Kenyon Drake last year, who wasn't great, but he still averaged 66%, or he played 66% of the opportunities, which is 13th among all running backs, 16 carries per game, which was 7th most, 31 targets, 25 receptions, 57 red zone touches, which is insane. 955 rushing yards, which is 12th most, 137 receiving yards, 12.8 fantasy points per game, and 10 touchdowns. But he was not efficient. He was 0.66 yards created per touch, is absolutely pathetic, which is 55th among all running backs. And there was a point last year where people were really talking about clamoring, get Chase Edmonds in there. Chase Edmonds needs to start. But so if you look at Chase Edmonds, he only played 38% of the opportunities, 97 carries, 68 targets, 25 red zone touches, 448 rushing yards, 402 receiving yards, 53 receptions, 7th most among all running backs, 5 total touchdowns, 10.5 fantasy points per game. He was also not very efficient either, 136 yards created and 0.91 yards created per touch, which is also 50th. Only one goal line carry. Here's a fun fact for you. He only has one goal line carry in his entire career. One. He has never been utilized inside the red zone, inside the 5, and he's not going to this year. I don't see that changing all of a sudden, but he was very useful in the passing game, and that's what makes him so. The upside is there, I guess, in PPR formats, but just not in the 5th round. There's some running backs in that range that I just really like, and I just can't see myself taking Chase Edmonds over him. And I know people are trying to call him, Austin Eckler, but I think that's a bridge too far. Just give me the discount on James Conner in the 8th round. And the way this hype is building for Chase Edmonds, I would be surprised if he falls down further than that. James Conner has looked good in camp, and I think he does take on that Kenyon Drake role where he's going to handle the first and second down. He's going to be the goal line guy. And so, yes, with Kyler Murray there, Kyler Murray is going to have some rushing touchdowns, but it's not but we're also not talking about a Josh Allen type, right? Kyler Murray is much more small in frame. So you're probably going to be much more willing to give it to James Conner. So I like James Conner going in the 8th round. And if you're waiting on runner, you take an anchor running back and you're waiting, and then, you come back in the 5th or 6th round, give me Javonte there. And then if you want to take, James Conner in the 8th, I think he's a decent flex option on a lot of weeks. And I think he could be kind of a steal at his current ADP. Remember, last year, Kenyon Drake was going in the 2nd round. 2nd round, people were all over themselves about Kenyon Drake last year. And now you're getting James Conner, who's likely going to have a very similar role, who's going in the 8th round. So I just think it's ridiculous. And so I like this offense. This offense is going to be better. They added Rodney Hudson, who is one of the better centers in all of football. So that's a big upgrade for them there too. So I don't know. I like James Conner, and I really don't mind taking him in the 8th round. I think it's a good gamble to take.
When that signing first came across, I just completely dismissed it. Great, this is fantastic news for Chase Edmonds, and we have not gotten that positive drumbeat for Chase Edmonds the way that I thought we would. And in fact, the blurb that's been coming out with training camp is that this is more or less going to be a hot hand approach, which just sucks, man. I was really hoping Edmonds could take over this role and be the guy. Not someone who was going to get 250 carries or anything like that, but at least be the 1A in this rotation. And it is looking like it's shaping up to be a little bit of a headache. So in that case, give me the cheaper guy. And Conner has now grown on me, and I cannot deny him any longer. The second back that I'm going to bring to the sleeper table here is going to be Xavier Jones, who on Underdog is going as RB54 at 189.5. And over on Fantasy Football Calculator, his ADP is 3 rounds higher at 1204, but he's still just RB54. And I'm not going to sit here and try and pretend like I am, Xavier Jones connoisseur and I know all this shit about him. I don't. But what I do know is that they are not going to be giving Darrell Henderson 22, 25 carries per game the way that they were Cam Akers at the end of last season. And they've actually come out and said as much. McVay has said that, they need to monitor his workload so that he's able to stay healthy for the duration of the season. So that to me does not sound like somebody who is just going to take over the Cam Akers role and just be that guy. They're going to be working other guys in. I do know they have guys like Jake Funk, who some people are talking up at camp, but it is, as if we sit right here today in early August, the one who's been getting the most positive buzz, especially from McVay, has been Xavier Jones. So if he ends up not being the guy and it is Funk or one of these other running backs, at this price, it doesn't matter. You cut him and move on. If you do want a little nugget to chew on to give you some, a little bit of like some good feeling with trying to target somebody like Xavier Jones, in his last season at SMU, he had over 1,200 rushing yards and 23 touchdowns in his final season. And those 23 rushing touchdowns led the entire NCAA that year in 2019. So definitely some talent there. You're not just going to run for 23 touchdowns because, even at SMU, it's not Ohio State. I get it. But even at a D1 program like that, to be able to put up 23 touchdowns is still quite the feat. Like I said, led the entire NCAA. So for the RB2, I was expecting him to shoot up higher in draft boards and ADP, and he quite frankly hasn't. Now, maybe with some more positive buzz, he will, and maybe that'll end up being a spot that we won't necessarily want to target him. But like I said, August 5th, we are recording this, RB54 on Underdog. So give me that all day.
I'm right there with you. I am team Xavier Jones in terms of the backup running backs in LA. I did the Darrell Henderson kind of breakdown right after the Cam Akers injury happened, and I kind of dug into these guys, Xavier Jones and Jake Funk, and then Raymond Calais, and just kind of see who these guys were. And, he did stand out to me, and he was talked up heavily last year. And in training camp last year was a guy that they really, really liked, and how well that he really stood out to them last year, which is a testament as to why they didn't go out and add anybody. I mean, I think everybody was like, oh, they're going to go add somebody. Yeah. And the speculation around was all like, Le'Veon Bell, or are they going to bring Todd Gurley back and all this stuff? But I like the move. Like, go with the young guy, right? Like, those guys that are going to be there, they're always going to be there. Like, Le'Veon Bell is still going to be sitting on his ass, in September or October, right? Like, let's see what you got in these guys. I think it's smart. Darrell Henderson isn't going to play in the preseason, so they're going to, all these running backs are going to get an opportunity to really, make themselves the RB2 in this backfield. And if they can do so, they won't sign anybody. And I think that really could be wheels up for Xavier Jones. And if anything happens to Darrell Henderson, we really could be talking about somebody who's an absolute steal here in this backfield. So I do like Xavier Jones. I think he's the more explosive guy. People like Jake Funk because of his athletic profile, but he did absolutely nothing in college. Nothing. He never got an opportunity. Even when in his senior year, I think was the year he kind of broke out a little bit, but he's also a really older prospect. But, it's Xavier Jones for me. So I do like that. And I've been targeting him in Underdog drafts. My last guy is a guy that I've been talking about all offseason, and it's not going to stop. And because I am firmly in this boat of this man, Jerick McKinnon. A little, last year, he was pretty good last year. He wasn't bad for the 49ers. He played in 14 games, but he only played 39% of the snaps, much more of the pass-catching running back there in San Fran. But he had 81 carries. 81 carries, average about 5.8 per game, 319 rushing yards, but he had 33 receptions on 46 targets, 253 receiving yards, which was 22nd, 6 total touchdowns. He had four goal line carries, only 7.5 fantasy points per game, but he had 139 yards created, 1.22 yards created per touch, but he had 7.7 yards per reception, 13th among all running backs, and then 1.27 yards per route run, which was 18th among all running backs. And for the first half of the season, he was being utilized pretty heavily, especially when they had injuries. And 3 or 4 of the first 6 games that he played were double-digit fantasy points. So he still has something left in the tank. And I'll say this, at Chiefs training camp, he has been getting a lot of buzz from Andy Reid, from Patrick Mahomes, talking about that this guy is going to be an absolute weapon for them. He's going to get opportunity. And if he can take over that number 2 running back job, I think he could see 30 to 35% of the touches in this backfield. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not going to get 80% of the backfield. This is not going to happen. This is not the way that Andy Reid really operates. And so I think that could be good news. And I think you could see him being utilized heavily as a pass catcher here on 3rd down. And so I like Jerick McKinnon. He's something that absolutely nobody's talking about whatsoever. And again, if anything were to happen to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I still think Darrell Williams would probably get an opportunity as well. But Jerick McKinnon, not that I think Jerick McKinnon would step in and be the lead back, but I think he would definitely be heavily utilized as a pass catching running back far more if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is gone. So if it were to get hurt, so. or versus healthy. So I like Jerick McKinnon quite a bit. He's absolutely free right now, and I think he's going to continue to be. And I think, but he's going to be a guy that I think in PPR formats, I think can be a useful weapon. I don't think he's going to be like Nyheim Hines level good, but I think he can still finish as a flex option type guy, an RB4, something right around there. So I like Jerick McKinnon, but he's just nobody's talking about him whatsoever.
It's the same thing with Xavier Jones, right? The price is right, and he's in a good offense. And if he doesn't end up working out, you cut him and move on. These kind of guys at the end of your draft are typically going to be the ones that, when injuries hit, bye week apocalypses and all that stuff, these are the guys who you are going to be looking to cut first anyway. So you might as well take a shot on someone who is in an explosive offense the way that those two are. But that is going to wrap it up. That is our video on the top 5 running back sleepers for 2021 fantasy football. We appreciate you guys checking out. Please hit us with a like. Subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. The Discord is growing. If you have any questions on anything, please jump in. Just any general talk, redraft, dynasty, Devy, DFS is going to be kicking back up. So we would love to see you guys over in the Discord. And make sure you drop a comment. Let us know if there are any other sleepers that we did not mention that you are targeting in your upcoming drafts.